not everyone realizes what the price of liberty is.
That's true. So I was just saying, take us back to spring of 1943 when you first arrived at Thorpe Abbotts. I know that was a very unique time. What was it like when you first got there?
We all had questions on our mind also, because they didn't have a base for us when we arrived. And they decided to move us to Thorpe Abbotts. The British hadn't even released it yet to the Air Force. Their personnel was still there. They were still building on the site. And we didn't have any crews there at the time. We didn't have our airplanes. We just wondered what was coming next, you know. And after we got there, and we had time to set up our tents on our hard stands and get what equipment we had utilized where we could use it. And I remember the day the Jack Swartout was my first crew on my airplane, and I remember what a thrill that was when I looked up and seen my B-17 taxiing in on my hard stand, you know. Arch Drummond was Jack's co-pilot. Art slid the cockpit window back, and he says, "Any of you boys down there chew tobacco?" And he threw a whole carton of brown mule chewing tobacco out.
And that was the first crew that you had?
That was my first crew.
And what plane was that?
Skipper.
Okay.
Yeah. Colonel Turner was Olin Turner was our commander, and he claimed the airplane. He named it. He called his wife Skipper, so he said, "I'm going to name this airplane Skipper." So it flew mostly lead missions. One of the lead crew, or he was leading a group.
Tell me about. I know that was your first crew. Tell me about the guys that were part of your team, your ground crew there.
My assistant crew chief was Harold Nirenberg. Everyone called him Nose. They were staff sergeants, and then man under him was Keith Conklin, was a sergeant, and then Joe Clopton was a low man on a totem pole. He was only a corporal. But the four of us kept the airplane flying. And if we had an engine change, which we did right off, we would just take the core engine out of a box and set it on sandbags next to the failed engine, and remove everything from the failed engine over to the new one. And it would take us, I remember the first one took us 3 days to change that engine. After we got a support group, they built the engines up for us, and we could change the engine in half a day, you know, and have the airplane ready to go again. Made a big difference.
In those early days of the 100th Bomb Group, who was your immediate? Who did you report to, and what were their marching orders for you guys? The way it was set up, we had 12 crews, and we had 3 flight chiefs. They had 4
crew chiefs under them. And then we had a line chief who was Bob Spangler, and then our engineering officer, Bill Carlton. So.
And what kind of stuff what kind of orders did they give you guys as far as, we want you to be on top of this, or we want you guys to do these things? Did you get any?
Yeah, well, they got their orders from Captain Carlton, and our flight chief would tell us if our airplane needed an inspection or whatever. We took orders from our flight chief. Bob Spangler was core of the group. He came out of the old 29th Bomb Group at Tampa, Florida, and he had already been maintaining B-17 for over a year, so he was pretty sharp on them. So any problems one of us crew chiefs had, we'd go to Bob to solve the problem for us.
Now, do you remember that very first mission that the group flew in 1943?
I did, yeah. It was to La Police, the sub pens. I remember the crews came back. They weren't under fighter attack or anything. They was all happy and laughing. This is going to be an easy life for us. That changed in about 3-4 missions. Once they had to fight their way in and out, German fighters, picture changed for them.
And what I imagine when you guys started out, there probably had to be a lot of pressure on you. I mean, that's the first time you guys had to service planes that were going on missions. Tell me about what kind of pressure was on you to make sure you got it right.
Well, they more or less left that up to the crew chief, and like I said, if I had a problem above my experience, then I'd go to my line chief to help me out. It was teamwork. We all had to work together to get the job done,
Dad, as far as pressure on y'all to get the job done, my impression is that pressure came from yourself because you cared for your air crew and wanted them safe.
Well, yeah, it was my job to okay the airplane. I had to stand behind my crew, and I had a good crew. I couldn't ask for a better assistant than Nurnberg was. He was almost old enough to be my daddy. He was a lot older person than we were just kids, 18 years old.
And I know you said when the guys came back from the first mission, there was a sense of, oh, this is going to be easy. But yeah. What do you remember about the first missions they came back on where the planes were pretty shot up? Do you remember seeing them come back from those missions?
It was a solemn bunch of guys. Yeah. They had to learn by then that it wasn't a cakewalk. Serious business. A lot of the crews took it well. Some of them didn't, some of them afraid to fly. But they didn't let anybody know about it.
And on some of those early missions, did you guys go out and wait by the airfield and watch the planes come in?
Well, the 351st had an advantage over the other squadrons because our hard stand was parallel to the runway, and we saw every takeoff, every landing, every airplane that had wounded aboard and all that. We saw that where the other squadrons didn't. You know, they were stationed in a circle around the perimeter, and our dispersal started. Dispersal one was where the airplane took off from. They always took off from east to west and came in from west to east. So the ground crew was always out there waiting for the group to come in to see if his airplane was coming back or not, you know. The tower, it was covered with officers waiting also. Yeah.
So take me through, once that plane lands and the guys get out, that's when your work starts. Can you give me kind of an example of take me through the process of what you guys do working through the night to get it ready for the next
well, when that crew taxied in and got out, the crew chief, first thing he done was consult with the pilot to see if he had any particular item that needed looked at or checked out or whatever. And after the combat crew had left for debriefing, our work started, my work started, didn't end until we got the airplane ready to go again. And that might be right up to the hour of takeoff, lots of times.
What are some of the, unless there's something major that's broken, what are some of the common things you do are there some things you do every time to get it ready again?
Well, the first thing I'd done after a mission was a thorough walk around the airplane, make sure there wasn't any metal damage or anything with the airplane or any mechanical problem that they might be having. Then I could assign my crew what to work on. And like I said before, teamwork, we worked together, you know. We didn't quit till the airplane was ready to go again. Most pilots, when they come out, they would want the crew chief to walk around the airplane with them, you know, to point out anything they need to be aware of.
And I've seen some photos where you guys are just covered in grease from getting dirty, working on the planes, making sure it's ready.
Yeah, we stayed fairly dirty. We washed our coveralls in 100 octane gas, so.
And when you spent the night there, you didn't stay in the barracks normally. You stayed
in the beginning. I did. Then when the officer on duty at night would come around and wake the crew chief up, it was up to him to wake up his boys. And I got the idea right quick. It'd be a lot easier on me if I just put me a cot out in my tent and stayed out there, and that's what I did. And I knew that all the operation was going on as it should, you know. The ordnance was the first people on the airplane that the day of a mission. They loaded the bombs first, and our little putt-putts, we call them, external power source, had a little engine on it. You had to start before you get the power on it. And they didn't know anything about it, so I always had mine powered up and ready for them. So that helped them, and it helped me also. I didn't have a crowd around the airplane all the time. After ordnance came, our fuelers would fuel the airplane up to the load it's supposed to carry. After armament was through, everybody's job was secured, and the last thing they did was come back and top off the fuel tanks. Yeah. They were mission ready then.
What would you say was the single most difficult thing to have to fix on a plane?
I would say a landing gear problem. We just had about the only way we had to get an airplane up was wing jacks, you know, and I don't know whether you ever saw one of those old jacks or not. They were a tripod jack on casters that we pull around. A huge jack. As you pump raise the airplane, you had a locking nut that you had to keep screwed down in case your hydraulic pressure failed. You know, the airplane wouldn't drop. It'd stop on that. Lots of things involved in jacking an airplane. But if you had an oleo strut to repack or something like that, it was a big job trying to do it out there in the open, you know.
And I know you said Jack Swartout was your first pilot that came through. Who was the next crew that came through on your hard stand after Swartout?
Luther Bennett.
But Arch took over for a while, didn't it, Dad?
Yeah, Skipper too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Swartout was co-pilot.
Arch Drummond was a pilot on Skipper when it crashed on takeoff. My airplane, the Skipper and Squawking Hawk and the 349th were in a race to see who reached 50 missions first. That airplane and crew would get to go back to the States on a bond tour, and the crew chief would go with it. And I was anticipating getting to go back home and see my son there. And the morning Arch took off was one of those days when you couldn't hardly see an airplane taking off. When he broke out of the overcast, this B-24 from I think it was taken off, had lost the engine, and 24 wouldn't climb like 17 if it lost an engine. And when he broke out, well, there was the 24, he was going to have a mid-air whisk, so he went under it, and then he never could pull the skipper back up and crashed. He didn't kill but one of his crew members, but the airplane burned up. So the Squawking Hawk got to go back to States.
And then when Luther Bennett came in, that was Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, of all the pilots and crews that came through there, was there anyone in particular that you would say you were the closest with, or you had a really good relationship with?
Luther.
Why is that?
Luther Bennett. Yeah. Yeah, I was closer to he and his crews than any of the others because I kept them longer. And
Dad, explain about when you moved to Humpty Dumpty. Explain about how the squadrons were expanding and how that all worked.
well, we'd gone from 12 airplanes to 16, and they took Nirenberg off of my crew and gave him Skipper 2, and
made him a crew chief.
And then I got Humpty Dumpty. That's the way that all worked out. But actually, I guess I crewed Skipper 2 longer than any other airplane because it flew over 100 missions and returned to the States.
That's when you had a new group commander who wanted more military discipline. Yeah, talk about that whole story, Dad. Was that when Colonel Jeffries came?
Tom Jeffries. He came from the 390th, and he was stricter for military discipline. He said all ground crews are going to go into the squadron area once a week in close order drill, and we knew that wasn't going to work, but he didn't. So after the first time we went into March, all the airplanes weren't ready to go, and the second time it come up, he was raising Cain about it, and Major Ravino, he stuck to his ground crew. Didn't anybody bother the ground crew with him, and he said, well, Colonel, do you want your airplanes ready to go, or do you want to play soldier? So that ended that. We didn't have to march anymore. But actually, I can see now where Colonel Jeffries' insistence on discipline paid off. Our squadron discipline had got pretty bad at the time. Chuck, our group commander had to go back to take on kind of
Harding?
Chuck Harding. He was a great guy, but he didn't insist on strict discipline, and it got pretty bad. And
so the ground crews saw people come and go. You saw things in the early days, and you saw when discipline was lacking, and then you saw when it improved. So I'm sure you saw just a considerable change in how things were there.
It did change, and I didn't know this until after we started having these meetings, and the British people started coming over, and Ron Batley told me that our squadron, the 351st, got a citation. We flew, the 351st flew 50 missions without an abort, and that was quite an accomplishment. And 3rd Air Division gave us a citation, but we never did get it because they thought it would be a morale breaker, you know, that the other squadrons would feel like that they were just as good, but
What was the first time at Thorpe Abbotts when you actually got to go up in a B-17?
oh my goodness, I flew all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. I flew just Colonel Turner and I'd go up. He had a brother, he was a fighter pilot that flew out of Debden, and the fighters are always buzzing our base, you know. And Colonel Turner come out to Hardstown, he said, come on, Chris, let's go. Everyone called me Chris. Said, let's go buzz the fighter base. So just he and I'd go up. I'd fly co-pilot for him. I asked him one day, I said, well, what would I do if something happened to you? I'm not checked out on this airplane. He said, well, we'll go make a few touch and goes and I'll show you how to do it. But I don't think it worked out very well.
Now, talk about all the flying you did during training.
Well, the best training we had was at Boise, Idaho at Gowan Field. We trained 24 hours a day there. They were trying to build up the groups overseas, you know, and they were training as quick as they could. So the crew chief had to fly with the flight crews. So if they, and we were training 24 hours a day, and most of the flights made was at night. I had one crew that I was flying with one night, and the pilot said, I need some sleep. He said, get in the pilot seat. I almost set the airplane on autopilot. And you sit here and monitor the airplanes. We were flying from Baker, Idaho to Pocatello. And he said, when you get down to Pocatello, well, you wake me up, I'll turn you around, and you can go back the other way. So I sat there like a dummy all night. I don't know what I've done, something like that. He got him a good night's sleep anyway.
But that early training had to be invaluable for understanding the ins and outs of the plane and how it flies.
That was where we really learned the airplane.
Talk about Seattle and how that helped, Dan.
Yeah, when we left Shepherd Field, our graduating class was sent to Seattle to spend 1 month in the factory seeing how the airplane was built from the ground up, and that really did help because we knew where to go look for a problem, you know, whereas guys that didn't get that training wouldn't. And after that month training, we were put on a troop train for Tampa, Florida. and it was a Pullman. Sometime during the night, going through Wyoming, an old coal burning engine. The guys opened the window in their booth, and they had screens on it, but Sanders was to find that come through that screen and got in her eyes. And when we got to Chicago, they stopped us and put those boys in the hospital to treat their eyes. Their eyes were all swelled up, from that cinders. So we were about 3 days late getting to Tampa, and we were supposed to go with the 92nd Bomb Group to North Africa. And we got there and they'd already left, so they put us in Tent City, they called it, down in the swamps. And wasn't sure what to do with us at the time, and then that was when the 100th Bomb Group was really formed out of the old 29th Bomb Group. And we went to Boise, Idaho, and that's where we got our initial training.
Interesting how things work out just by, a train being late and you're now in a different group. What was you were telling me about a number of the flights you went on? Was the Russia shuttle mission? Was that the first actual mission that you formally took part in?
Yeah, that was the first mission I'd ever taken part in. Yeah.
Can you tell me about what happened on that mission?
Yeah, I'd always wondered what the flight combat crews went through, and I wanted to see. And at that time, the German fighters, were just about shot out of the sky. We didn't get attacked by fighters. There was lots of flak. It was a mercy mission. The freedom fighters, Polish freedom fighters, were out of material, out of everything. The mission was called the Frantic Mission. They were frantic. They didn't have anything, so they devised a container that could be put in the bomb bay with a parachute attached, and filled them with pardon my arms, clothing, food, everything they needed, because they were quite a hindrance to the Germans, and it was a sight to see when we flew over Warsaw, and they had markers, had put sheets out, markers to drop the containers on. And after we dropped those, we continued on to Mirgorod, Russia. This was the second frantic mission. I didn't go on the first one. So Poltava was where they just about wiped them out. During the night, the Germans knew they were going, and Colonel Jeffrey said, "Well, I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to take my group on to Mirgorod," and that saved the 100 from being bombed during the night at Poltava. So they scheduled us to go to Mirgorod from Poland, and it was quite a flight, 11 hours and 20 minutes. And airplanes were running out of fuel. I had told Luther when we left that I could probably save a lot of gas if he'd let me set the mixture controls. I knew how far to let the cylinder temps go and all that, so when we got to marriage rod, we had 300 gallons of gas left.
Wow. And how long were you guys actually there before you turned around and went back to Thorpe Abbott's?
Just the next day we left. We were loaded up with Russian bombs. First, they loaded the wrong kind of bombs on, and looked like kids to me. Come out there. One of them went upstairs, and they just toggled them out on the ground. You know, loaded the right bombs up. We Bulgaria, wasn't it?
I think it was Hungary, Dad. Marshalling yards.
Yeah. So we dropped the bombs there and dropped down to 12,000 feet, and we were flying under 15th Air Force orders, and they had failed to tell us about this copper mine we flew over, and they had 12 88 flight guns down there. And at 12,000 feet, we were like ducks on a pond, you might say. Anyway, Luther told me, he said, I don't want you getting on a machine gun, you might shoot one of our own airplanes down. Said they started using that chaff, aluminum strips, to mess up the Germans' sights on their flight guns. And he said, I want you to take care of the chaff. So after we dropped our bombs and dropped down, I was laying there in the waist compartment. I had on a parachute, eating me up.
K ration?
K ration, and all at once those light guns started going off, and I was pushing these bales of chaff out the camera well. I punched them all out, and Luther called me and said, Chris, throw some more of that chaff out. It's getting a little rough up here. So I'm sorry, but I've got rid of all of it. Anyway, we were flying to Foggia, Italy. And when we landed at Foggia, we had some airplanes shot up, and Joe Picard and I, Joe had flown the first Frantic mission, and he's one that talked me into going on this second one. And he and I stayed there we had two airplanes that couldn't fly from battle damage, so we stayed there and fixed those up, and the rest of the group left. When we got the airplanes ready to fly, we just flew from there straight back to Thorpe Abbott's. It was quite an experience I wouldn't take for it.
And you were awarded the Polish Cross, is that right, for your participation in that?
Yeah, everybody involved in that was awarded the Polish Cross.
And speaking of awards, you also got the Bronze Star. Can you tell me what what you were
I
awarded
got the Bronze Star for my airplane flying over 50 missions without an abort.
That's an incredible feat.
I guess there's a lot of luck involved in it. I wasn't that much better than anybody else, but they seen fit to give me an award for it. I appreciate that.
So I know you've told this story many, many times, but it never gets old hearing it. Tell me about what you saw on the day of Frank Valesh's infamous crash on the base.
Well, the true story was never told on that, because me and my crew was doing a 100-hour inspection on my airplane. We had cowling off all the engines and everything. We were doing a heavy check. And dispersal 6 and 7 was real close. And Dick Wildrick was a crew chief on hanging expense, and that day Frank and Pinky Flack from another airplane brought these nurses out. I thought just show them around the airplane. They were walking around it, looking at it. And all at once I heard the engine cranking up. He made a battery start. The airplane was grounded because it had 2 bad prop gunners on it. And the logbook wasn't even on the airplane. First thing a pilot does when he goes on the airplane, look at the logbook, see if there's anything wrong with it. Well, they had their mind on something besides the logbook. And after he got this one engine started, he got it online, cranked the other 3. I still didn't realize what he was up to, and then I seen the airplane taxiing out, and I said, gosh, he's going to get himself in trouble with it. Airplane not even, it's on a red cross. When the logbook had a red cross on it, the airplane grounded, you know. So we all stopped working on my airplane and started watching Frank, and here he come, you know. Well, I saw it when it left the runway, and he was headed toward my dispersal, and every dispersal had a little outhouse out from it. And one of the armament guys was inside it when Frank came across our taxiways. Wingtip hit it and turned it over. I'd like to have a picture of that guy trying to get his pants up and run into, you know. Anyway, he wound up in Farmer Draper's barnyard. That's where the airplane stopped and burned. They got out of the airplane, but Frank blamed it on the tail wheel not being locked, but that wasn't what caused the crash. The 2 engines that had the bad prop gunners ran away on him, over revved, and that's what brought him off. I know for sure that's what it was.
So you were one of the few to see the whole thing firsthand, it sounds like.
I saw it from start to stop. They only charged Frank $1 for that. He wasn't even court-martialed for that.
One thing I was going to ask you about is at the end of the war, after missions had ceased, how did your job change at that point once the guys were no longer flying missions?
You mean after an airplane came in from a mission?
Well, so in April of 45, May of 45, once the bombing missions had stopped altogether,
Oh,
there were I guess your job changed a lot at that point.
well, we started the Hunters Bomb Group was named to be one of the groups that brought the French back home from Austria, and
Labor camp workers.
I volunteered for that. We were flying from Vienna to Reims, France, and we boarded up to Bombay and put seats in the waist compartment so we could carry all the people we could get in there and fly them in and come back and get another load. At offset, well, no, when I first went over, we had to find a place to stay, and the MPs said, find some family here that'll take you in. And I stayed with a German Luftwaffe fighter pilot that had his hand shot off, and he had come to the States, gone to college, got his degree and everything. He went back home, and the war got him, you know. He talked good English, URI, and nice fella. He said, I didn't want this war any more than you guys did. Said, I just caught up in it, you know. But that was another experience I had. As far as flying, I've done a lot of flying.
It sounds like you volunteered for just about anything there.
Yeah.
At the end of the war, you know, you guys had a lot more free time, and they had some baseball games on base and things like that. Did you ever participate in any of that stuff towards the end?
No, they were taking people back due to points. If you had above 80 points, you could go back home. I had more points than anybody else over there because I had Bronze Star and some of this other stuff, you know. It added up to, so I was the first one to leave the base to come home. So I wasn't involved in any of the sports activities you had during that.
It must have been, I'm sure you were ready to go back home to see your family, but I'm sure it was somewhat bittersweet at the same time to say goodbye to all the guys.
Yeah, well, see, a portion of our squadron went to Germany. Captain Carlton with a group of guys. I wanted to come home all right. Afterward, I would like to seen Germany, you know, and seen some of the destruction and everything over there, but I was ready to come home. Even though I was fortunate going over, I went over on the Queen Elizabeth, came home on the Queen Mary. So I got to go over and come back on the two best boats. Only took 5 days.
How easy was it was it easy or was it hard when you got back to kind of hang up your hat per se,
Well,
putting the war behind you and moving on?
I can tell you a little story about that. Me and one other Air Force guy at Camp Kilmer was put on a troop train taking the 36th Division that had been on the landing on the beaches. That's all that was on the train except us two Air Force guys. And we're headed to San Antonio to be discharged. And I didn't think I was going to make it because that was the wildest bunch of guys I ever rode with. I remember this one sergeant had his Texas hat, cowboy boots on, and a Texas flag. And he'd fall, when the train would stop at some station, he'd follow his guys out and they'd march off to town. Come back and they'd have their pockets loaded with liquor, you know. I spent lots of time outside the car, you know, between the cars, standing there. I stayed out there so I could bail off if I had to. They had never been paid, so they had all their money and everything. So that was one trip I didn't care to make again.
What was the feeling like when you pulled into the final stop and you were finally back home after being away for so long?
Well, the train stopped at Fort Worth. I had time to call my wife and tell her I was headed for San Antonio to be discharged. And she came down there. And there were thousands of guys. No place to stay, just laying around in the yard and waiting to get their discharge papers. She found this sergeant, said, I come down there to see my husband. He said, lady, I have no idea where he might be. And some guy said, I think I know where he is. He pointed me out. We had a little stay together.
And that was it. You got out after right then.
I wasn't out but just a few short weeks till I went to work for American Airlines. Had a good job. I owe it all to the service. I got good training, which I'd never got otherwise. So I owe my education and all to the service.